This is Hannibal here from thehannibaltv.com. Already on part 19 of my draft book, which is the third section about famous wrestlers I've worked with. I had no idea how many famous wrestlers I've worked with until up to this part, and I'm sure there's some I'm gonna forget, but it's kind of funny. It's gone on to three chapters now, and I haven't even gotten into the famous MMA fighters and celebrities I've worked with yet. So we'll let the author decide which ones to go into more detail and not on. I'll just give very basic answers to get through it. I will, as customary, go back to my bouncing stories, which was my last entry, quickly because there's a bunch. I could do a whole book on bouncing, but there's a couple others that I forgot about. At one point, I was the head bouncer at a bar called the Bulldog, right near the arena where the Ottawa Senators play, in like this large outdoor shopping mall. There was two bars there, a country bar and this other bar that played rock music as well as I guess country music. And for people that don't know this, the Senators Arena is like out towards the country. It's a good half-hour drive from downtown Ottawa. I don't know why it was probably they put it out there because they got a good deal on land, but it's out more to the countryside where the more cowboyish people are. So this was actually the only two bars close to the arena since it's not downtown are the bars in this mini mall. So the Ottawa Senators always came to this bar. At the time, Ray Emery, the famous goalie, I believe, was always coming to the bar. There was a lot of fights there, but none in it was mostly like fist fights. There was no weapons fights I can remember. But one thing I remember is Ray Emery was problematic in that bar sometimes because they had different rules for the hockey players than the regular people. Like one of the rules they established was they didn't want people wearing hats in the bar. And then the Senators always had like a table in the middle of the bar and they were always wearing hats. So it just caused so many arguments. And I do believe Ray Emery smoked at that time. And I mean, there was issues with him trying to smoke in the bar. I remember once I caught a guy fucking a girl in a bathroom stall in that bar where they wouldn't open the stall, so I actually had to kick down the door. That was pretty crazy. Another story about Ray Emery, I mentioned in my bouncer stories, I worked at a bar called Minglewoods. Ray Emery was actually going out in Ottawa quite often when he played for the Senators. And I mentioned I also worked at a bar called Barrymore. There was a friend of mine, and I forget his name. He was a bouncer at Minglewoods, tough guy, rugby player, that actually got into a fight with Ray Emery after Barrymore's closed. This was when I was still working at Minglewoods before I worked at Barrymore's, and Ray Emery threw him through a glass window. He never sued him. He probably should have. But yeah, he threw him through a glass window of a store outside Barrymore's. Then the last quick story I'll tell about Barrymore's, I said I used to work there. I actually, when I was back visiting Ottawa or between Puerto Rico stints, I once got into this weird fight outside of Barrymore's where it was my fault for hitting on a guy's girlfriend. I fully admit it was my fault, but I'm the one that turned it into a fight. And for the book purposes, one of my friends witnessed this and I could get him to he tells the story better. But it was funny because like I beat up the main guy. Not horrible. It was just like a regular fight. Then the one friend started mouthing off to me and I beat up the other friend. Then it's like the third friend, because there was three of them with this guy and his girlfriend. The third friend like starts giving me shit and it's like do you not expect the same thing to happen to you that happened to the first two friends? And someone calls the cops. So the cops show up. By this point, I mean, it was over, but they were mad for, I guess, starting the physical altercation. And again, I had been partying. I was like 24, 25 at this time. And I think I was going back to Puerto Rico the next day or the day after. So I wasn't even going to be in Ottawa. So I was thinking to myself, let's just let's just leave Canada with a bang. Um, but when the police came, I remember these three guys were like being very, very rude to the police and screaming and yelling at them and calling me names and calling the police names. And the officer just said, and I was calm by this point, and the officer just said, "You're free to go." Um, because again, nothing. These guys weren't serious. It was just basically a fist fight. So I, so I'm leaving, and this is the funny part. They start yelling and calling the officers names for letting me leave, and one of them ends up arrested just for being rude to the officers. And it was just funny because technically I did start that, and one of them got arrested. But in all honesty, I could understand why they arrested them. They were being rude to the police, and at this point, I hadn't really no one had gotten seriously hurt, and I was just wanting to go home, which me and my friend ended up just getting in a cab and going home. But I mean, for the purposes of the book, he tells the story better than me. It was just funny that first of all, like the second and third guy didn't expect the same thing to happen to them, and then that they end up arrested out of it. I thought that was funny. That was around 2007, many years ago. So let's and I got a million bouncer stories. I'm glad that phase of my life is over with, and the partying phase of my life is over with. Let's jump into the draft book part 19. I put Melina on here. Um, very, very nice person. Saw her backstage at events, and worked with her a little bit. She interfered in my match that I had with Harry British Bulldog Smith, allowing me to win. Very professional woman. One of the nicest. She's one of the nicest wrestlers I've ever met, and underrated diva. Tom Pritchard obviously has podcasts on this channel. I've done camps with him. Nice guy. Hugo Savinovich, interviewed him a bunch of times. Nice guy, but I would say I don't know if I would fully trust him just because of some of the things I've seen him say. Juventud Guerrera, one of the biggest assholes I've ever met, changed the finish of our match mid-match completely. He did all of it. I was gonna win no matter what, but like he basically did the shine. There was supposed to be the shine at the start where the babyface wins, heel takes over, then he gets the comeback, then the pin. He just did his shine, then basically pinned himself. And he was a complete asshole during the shoot interview, which I could get into in the book. Francine, I've interviewed a couple times, very nice woman. Snitsky, I've interviewed, nice guy. Almost positive Randy Orton got him fired for hurting him. Because I heard a radio interview where, well, first of all, Snitsky alluded to it with me, and then I heard a radio interview with Randy talking about Snitsky hurting him. And then Randy was like, "Oh yeah, I bet Snitsky's sitting at home right now. Hi Snitsky, if you're hearing this." Magnum TA, very nice guy. Done a couple interviews with him. Met him in person a bunch of good times. Mustafa New Jack's ECW partner, extremely nice guy. Tommy Dreamer, as I said, always appreciate him trying to get me hired by WWE, back around 2005, 2006. Wish it had come off. We did do an angle in 2010 where we wrestled and did a finish, which I might get into more in another chapter. We did a finish where We pretended it was a shoot, and Meltzer reported it as a shoot in the Observer. Everyone reported it. I even had some Quebec journalist named Pat Laprade still accuse me that it was real this year, which is crazy because Dreamer and I are friends, and that was a complete shoot, complete work. Um, and again, I'm still technically the Quebec champion, by the way, which I could get into in another chapter. There's funny stories about me being the Quebec undefeated Quebec champion. Danny Davis, dangerous Danny Davis, I've interviewed. Nice guy, Nightmare Danny Davis. I attended an OVW camp in like 2002 when I had like 7 matches under my belt. Met Nightmare, nice guy. Met Cornette at that one too, which he probably doesn't remember since I was so young. And he was nice to me at that time. James Ellsworth, weird guy. I've interviewed him a couple times. Bill Alfonso, nice guy. Wouldn't necessarily trust him. Just because I've seen, and not in my experience with him, but I've seen interviews with him where he'll say nice things about people, and then I'll see him blasting those same people in other interviews. Dr. D. David Schultz, him and I get along really well. I'd consider him well, I wouldn't say we're a friend, but we're acquaintances. But he's very money oriented. Ahmed Johnson, nice guy, underrated. Baby doll, nice woman. Brooklyn Brawler. There seems to be a lot to his relationship with Pat Patterson. Um, one of the longest tenured guys in WWE. Had a good interview with him. Strangely enough, he doesn't remember this, but before, like, when his book first came out, he didn't want to do an interview with me because he wanted everyone to do to read his book at the time, which obviously now he is doing lots of shoot interviews. And again, I like him from my interaction with the interview, but I remember strangely enough talking to him the time that he didn't want to do the interview and talking to him about maybe coming to Great North Wrestling. And strangely enough, in that conversation, he was saying that he would be interested in wrestling, but he didn't want to do jobs, which I found strange that he didn't want to do jobs on the independent scene. But I got no problem with Brooklyn Brawler. Good politician. The Grappler. I've interviewed him. I met him in SWE Fury. Supposedly behind the scenes, and this is confirmed by many people, he was one of, let's say, the quote unquote doctors in the back. Very good at obtaining medications for people. Victoria, met her backstage at WWE shows and interviewed her. Very nice. Jason Sensation, troubled individual mentally. Hope he continues to get better. Very nice guy. A sweet person. Steve Kern, I've talked about as far as being an agent for my match, meeting him backstage and WWE tryouts. Nothing bad to say about him. Nice guy. Rockin' Robin, Jake's sister, I've interviewed her. Very nice, classy woman. Eric Emery, he was one of the bookers of World Class Pro Wrestling when I wrestled for them. I might talk about him more in that chapter. Nice guy. Very nice guy. I've interviewed him. Chris Masters, I met him backstage and interviewed him. Nice guy. Tonga Kid, interviewed him. Nice guy. Tony Gurria. I mean, he's the one that chose me to have my WWE matches after we had our little tryouts, mini tryouts to see who would get matches at WWE shows. And he was friends with Les Thornton. I remember talking to him a bunch about Les Thornton. I've interviewed him. Nice guy. Ryback, never met him, but I did receive a strange email from him. First of all, he wanted at one point like $4,500 for a shoot interview. And then I complained about it on the air that he would never make $4,500 back. And then he sent me a message on Twitter where I'm at Twitter. It's the Hannibal TV and Devin Hannibal. And he just sent me a message to say he was blocking me. Hi, I'm blocking you from Twitter. And it's funny because I had never even messaged him on Twitter. I'd messaged him about the shoot interview via email, where he said it was going to be 4,500 for an hour. Overrated guy. Terry Runnels seemed to be on something during my shoot interview with her. Nice person. Bunkhouse Buck, always liked him in WCW, did a good interview with him. Scott Norton, did a good interview with him, seems like a nice guy. Devin Larratt, the arm wrestler, and I made a joke about him once in an interview, and it was just a serious, completely, it was just a complete joke. And here's the funny thing. Scott Norton called both Devin Larratt and I after and like totally snapped at us, and I don't know what he was going through. I mean, I have nothing against Scott Norton, but I just found it funny that like we were just making a simple joke because Scott Norton, I believe, was in Over the Top, which was one of Devin Larratt's, who's a famous arm wrestler, favorite movies. And he just made like a fake challenge to Scott Norton that wasn't serious, and Scott took it seriously. But I had a really good interview with him. He seems like a great guy. He just might be a bit temperamental. Mr. Hughes, nice guy. Brett Sawyer, who's passed away, I did a bunch of interviews with. Strange guy. Not sure how honest he was in his interviews. Weird guy as far as getting interviews with him and some of the messages he would leave me. But but overall, nice experiences with him. Steven Regal from the AWA, really nice guy. Really nice guy. Mr. Electricity, Steve Regal. Sonny Ono, great guy. I've had lunch with him. I've been friends with him for years. Great guy. Hope to actually work with him on projects at some point. Eric Watts, nice guy. I'm a friend with his dad, Bill Watts, but I can understand why Eric Watts had so much heat. Sorry, did I say I'm friends with Bill Watts? I meant I'm a fan of his dad, Bill Watts, as a promoter, and the success he had. But one thing I didn't like about Eric Watts is I know he charged me a lot for the shoot interview I did with him, which was probably one of the best shoot interviews he did, if not the best. But I know after that, and maybe it's because he's got a daughter that he's trying to get in NXT right now, but he did a ton of free interviews. And I just felt like a lot of wrestlers do this. They'll want a fortune to do an interview with me and then do a bunch of free interviews. And if you're wondering why I don't do as many interviews myself anymore, wrestlers want a lot of money to do interviews with me. And I don't know how much they think we make off YouTube, but it's not much. I still work a real job. Harvey Whippleman, good guy. Larry Henning, great guy. I've interviewed him, met him a bunch of times. Ken Resnick, very nice guy. Interviewed Ken Resnick. Craig Pittman, got a long interview with him, met him, stay in contact with him here and there. Nice guy. Lance Storm, done some training camps with him. Um, I don't know. He's a bit of a strange guy, and I don't like some of the things he's said over the years based on non firsthand information. Rick Bassman, one of my close friends in the wrestling business. One of the few guys that will call to check up on me. And this hooked me up with some good interviews. And one I don't think I ever told this. I've told it talking to Rick Bassman, but like I remember in 2006, Rick was trying to recruit me for UPW, and I didn't understand what a good deal he had as far as connections to WWE at that time. And I ended up going to Deep South Wrestling instead. Where a big regret of mine is that I didn't just go to Rick Bassman because he would have got me signed. In Deep South Wrestling, I was just looked at. If I had stayed there longer, I would have had a contract, but I was just looked at as like a tackling dummy, where Rick Bassman would have um like worked on some of my in-ring issues to like tighten up my wrestling ability, and he would have got me hired. And I really regret that I didn't go to UPW in 2006. That's one of my big regrets in wrestling, because that was before the Abdullah match happened where he infected me. So would have avoided a lot of hardships in my life. However, I never would have met my ex-wife, who honestly did a lot of good in my life. Never would have had Piper. So maybe everything happens for a reason. I'm 41 now. I mean, technically, I'm halfway through my life. Maybe if I take good care of myself, and my career is not over by far in the public eye. Whether it's wrestling or acting or reporting, I can turn things around. My my 2 to 3 years of hardships post divorce, I believe, is over. I'm going on as we speak today. Tomorrow will be my 1 month in the gym every single day. I'm taking the ultimate warrior philosophy on training. Rest and recovery is for the weak, is for the normals. It's not for the warriors. The warriors train every day. And I'm not going to go into the full Ultimate Warrior voice because I don't want to scare the neighbors. Sean Stasiak, he was a confidant of mine when I was in Texas. Met him once in person. Looked up to him as a kid because he won the equivalent of the states that I ended up winning in Ontario, because he lived in Ontario as a kid. So I always thought it was cool that he had won like the provincial championships, and it's like, I want to win this same thing that Sean Stasiak won, because at that time he was getting a bit of a push in WCW. Brian Blair, nice guy, but one of the most exaggerated storytellers of all time. I've interviewed him a bunch of times. Um, he, for instance, look up the story of Coco Beware and Andre the Giant. There's some stories that he tells that I just don't believe, but very nice guy. Typhoon, nice guy. Dan Crawford from Stampede Wrestling, nice guy. The other Dan Crawford, who I think was Phil LaFon in WWE, was also in Calgary around the time I was there. I met him a couple of times, various shows. Nice guy. I remember he really hated Johnny Ace from their days in Japan, and he wouldn't barely remember me. I don't even think he would remember me, but he was involved with some shows that we were doing for Lebanon, tapings that we were doing through Lebanon through a guy named Ali. And Dan Severn was involved in those. Glacier, I've done an interview with him. One of the more boring interviews, and I hate to say that. I believe Glacier is involved with the Nightmare Factory. Don't quote me on that though. Joel Gertner from ECW, interviewed him a bunch of times. Reno Riggins, and I don't know if you'd even consider him a famous wrestler, but for WWE 80s and 90s fans, you'd remember him. Long-winded answers. Nice guy, but very long-winded answers. Dave Sullivan, nice guy. Mario of Mancini, nice guy. Dick the Destroyer Buyer, one of my first interviews, nice guy. Nothing bad to say. Rodney Mack, I've wrestled him. I've been friends with him. I consider him a friend. We kind of lost touch after SW Fury. I was kind of pissed off at the way things ended there. He tried to get me to stay there, which I'll talk about in a chapter coming up soon. But I was friends with him during that time. Nice guy. I'm glad he's getting a good run in NWA. Also like his wife Jazz. She's really nice too. Scott McGee, for anyone that remembers him, I did a shoot with him Not one of my more entertaining shoots. Jack Victory, nice guys. Mike Bennett, lucky to have jobs as long as he has, and he's one of these guys that are under AW contract and hardly used too. Les Thatcher, I did a camp. He was running a camp at the 2004 Cauliflower Alley Club. I remember having like a mock match at that 2004 Cauliflower Alley Club, and this guy that was claiming to be such a judo and jujitsu expert ended up wrestling him and just like roughing him up in the match. I remember. I didn't like him. I don't like people that claim to be, and I don't claim to be a tough guy at all. But I will, if someone clearly is not tough at all, and they're claiming to be tough and claiming to be badasses, sometimes when you get in the ring with them, you want to expose them. Rip Rogers, he was at that 2002 OVW camp I did, and I've interviewed him. Nice guy. Apocalypse, who was Rick Victor in WWE of the Ascension, and he was in Stampede Wrestling. I've wrestled him a bunch of times, never had bad matches with him. I'm shocked he made it to WWE just because he didn't have much of a personality, but he was always a good mechanic. One thing I remember though, the last time I saw him, I was actually doing security at a WWE event, and he was talking. He seemed very unhappy with his role in WWE. But I'm thinking to myself, man, you're wrestling. I mean, that was not one of the high points of WWE. I mean, I think at that match, the main event was Ellsworth against AJ Styles in that horrible angle they did where Ellsworth was beating AJ Styles. Which by the way, that's I think that was the last of WWE event I ever did security at because it was too much for me as someone that paid so much dues to get in WWE and always tried to keep a good body and train hard, and the "you deserve it" chance when Ellsworth won his contract against AJ. I mean, that's just heartbreaking for someone like me who paid a lot more dues and could have been a way bigger star than him. I mean, that's jealousy. He had his role at the time, and he seems like a nice enough guy, bit of a weirdo, but nice enough guy. But like I couldn't. At some point, you don't want to be at these shows because it gets depressing for stuff like that. But anyways, talking to Rick at that time, he seemed so unhappy, and it's like, man, I'm doing security here for like I forget if it was $12 or $14 an hour. I don't know how much he was making, but he's under WWE contract, wrestling in front of like 5 to 7 thousand people on TV. I mean, being a jobber in WWE is better than like at a low income regular job. And I don't, I know for a lot of time Apocalypse was a dishwasher when he worked in Calgary. I think I remember at one time Natty was a waitress at Montana's, Natalia, and I'm pretty sure Apocalypse was a dishwasher there. So it's like, as bad as WWE may have seemed, better to be a WWE jobber than a dishwasher. Gangrel, really like Gangrel. Wrestled him twice. Nice guy. The Maestro from WCW. Nice guy. I know he's been going through some health hardships. God bless him. Someone says salam. K Dog loves my entries. Keep them coming. Yeah, I've had. Again, I'm just scratching the surface. So whoever ends up writing the book, I could go into a lot more detail, but pick and choose the best entries from when we do the book. So this was the part 19 of famous wrestlers I've worked with. If you click in the memories playlist, you could look at part 17 and 16, which was also about famous wrestlers. And yeah, we're plowing through this. I'm sure there's more that I've forgotten about, but that's this chapter.